Hey, welcome to Weld.com, home of TIG time. Hi, I'm Mr. TIG, and today we're going to do a product review on a plasma cutter. Now, we've done plasma cutters before, but what I like to do is I like to take a particular unit that I've used quite a bit and share it with you. So I brought in this particular plasma cutter, and it's called a PowerPlasma 50. So when I unpackage it, I want to show you what you get with this entire package. So you get the power supply itself. Now this is a dual voltage power supply. So what you get is this little adapter. So you can plug this into 110 or 220. And you get an assortment of tips. You get about 5 replacement tips. You can see the spare parts are right here. Now this little device, it's important. It's an air filter. Now one of the things that really kills your torch is moisture in the air. So check your air lines, make sure you've got it good, clean, and dry. This little device, it'll help, but it's not the fail-safe. Try to get all the moisture out long before it ever hits here. This is just a little insurance policy. And this is going to be a bracket that we're going to show you, how to put it into place. Anyway, I'm going to get my gear together, but before I do that, I just want to identify what the specs are for this machine. Now, I've got the operation instructions right here in front of me. But really, if you want to go on everlastgenerators.com, you can click on it. You can get a lot more in-depth information. For instance, how powerful is this? I mean, it's 50 amp, we know that, but how thick a material can we cut with it? And I got to tell you, in my reviews, I have found that most of the companies are over-advertising. And when I say that is, how thick can you cut with this? I don't know. We're going to find out. I've never challenged it to the top, but here's what's advertised. First of all, it's advertised as daily usage of this machine. It cuts 5/8 inch thick. Now, it doesn't identify the material, so I want you to understand, always assume that it's steel. Because when you go to cutting aluminum, it requires so much more energy to penetrate and cut aluminum. Aluminum just doesn't cut great. So let's talk about 5/8 inch thick steel, and we'll do that. We'll challenge it and see if it'll do that. Then it goes on to say, additionally, you can cut up to 3/4 of an inch and have a clean cut. The next step is it'll give you a severed cut, meaning it'll cut, but it's not going to be a clean cut. It'll sever up to 1 inch. Okay, well that's quite a challenge, and so we'll see if we can do that. Now let's get into duty cycles, because duty cycles, they're only words. Until you challenge the machine and really work it hard, you don't know if it's real or not. Now this machine runs off of 115 or 240. So when you're on 115 and you turn it up to 25 amps for cutting, it's showing a 60% duty cycle. When you turn it down to 20 amps, it'll give you 100% duty cycle. Don't know that for sure. I think the only time you'd ever hit that duty cycle is if you use this little device, and this comes with it. This is a little adapter if you want to go into CNC cutting, and on the back you can plug it in and hook it up and run all day long as everything will handle it. Now let's go to 240, hooking this up to 240. If you're at 50 amps, that's the maximum this machine will go. It gives you 60% duty cycle. And if you lower it down just to 40 amps, which you can still do some pretty thick materials at 40 amps, it gives you 100% duty cycle. So that just gives you an idea of what's being advertised in these machines. So, the manufacturers, when they send these here, they don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to test it, and I'm going to tell you whether it'll do it, whether I like it, whether I don't like it. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to put my gear on, and I'm going to go through and test this machine. I'm going to cut some thin material, and I'm going to cut some heavy material, and show you how to set it up and use the machine. So let me get my gear on, and we'll start the setup. Okay, now the first thing we're going to hook up is the ground clamp, and it's got a little DINS 25 connector. If you look at it, it's about 1/4 of an inch in diameter. And there's only one place to hook it up, so you can't put it in backwards. So turn it to the right, as tight as you can get it, and now that's hooked up. Second is I do want to take the plasma torch itself, and be very careful not to hit the end of this torch, because you could damage it or start distorting that hole where it has to shoot out at a very tight orifice. Okay, so this is actually pretty self-explanatory. There's only one little slot here that allows you to put this in correct. So that slot is at top dead center, and you tighten it on, and really you're almost ready to go. Now, one of the things that you have to have is air, and we're going to show you how to hook up the air. But what I found was, here's our shop air. We just grabbed the line, and this is a standard fitting. Now, unfortunately, there's a couple of standard fittings, but this is the male version, and so we try to hook this up, and it just won't go. So that's kind of a tough deal, because you're ready to go, you're ready to cut, and you don't have the right part. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to change it out to the one that matches this, and we'll get it hooked up and get it going. Okay, just that quick. Hey, now I want to talk about some of the settings on the machine, and we're going to go through different settings every time we change materials. But when we're in the real thin materials, we're only going to be cutting at about 15 to 20 amps. So we'll do our sheet metal at very low amperage, and then when we get up to the high stuff, the thick materials, we're going to be at 50 amps. But let's start right here. Okay, to turn the machine on, the switch is in the back. So I'm going to turn it on, and you'll hear the fan come on, and the fan will be constant. Okay, I want you to take a look at this knob right here, because this is the amperage knob. And right now, it's set on 50, and it'll go all the way down to about 19 amps. Now, we'll do our sheet metal on 19, and then we'll do our heavy-duty 1-inch thick at the maximum. So what happens is, when you're at the maximum, you're putting out a lot of amperage, and this torch is getting extremely hot. So one of the things you want to incorporate is you want to put a post flow in, and that post flow is just air. It's just cool air cooling off your torch. So I'm going to go ahead and put in about, I don't know, 5 to 10 seconds on this, and you can actually time it. Here's a little toggle button here that says timed flow. So as long as you've got that on, it's going to do whatever you say, whatever you set it up on the green button. So let's try it and let's see if it does. Okay, so that's my pilot. I discontinue. That's my post flow. And you can hear it. You can hear it hiss. And that in turn will cool off the torch. Okay, now if you're running hot all the time and you want that air flowing all the time, all you have to do is hit this little toggle, switch it down, and it says constant. You can hear it. So if I'm welding, or if I'm cutting, finish my cut, that'll stay on until you tell it not to. So just know you have that option on there. Okay, now what's really critical, the manufacturer recommends setting the air pressure at about 70 psi. So you can see that there's a gauge here, and you can pull this knob out, and you hear a little click. It's like an indent. Yeah, so you can start adjusting. And you can see that my pressure is way too low. So if you start having cutting problems, take a look at your pressure. Maybe your pumps aren't keeping up with it. You may have it set incorrectly, but just keep an eye on it. Get it back up to 70 if you want to get the best performance. Now, if you go over pressure on it, you're probably going to blow out your tips much too soon. So these are consumable. I'm going to go ahead and set this back at 70. And I'm going to go ahead and get my gear on and start doing some cutting. So I'm going to do some real thin material, and I'm going to progress up to heavy material. Okay, we're going to start off and set this machine to do sheet metal. So if you're doing car restoration, I know a lot of you are. I've got some rusty 16 gauge material here, and this machine has settings on it from 19 amps to 50 amps. you know, we're only going to need the low end of this machine to cut this. So I got it set on 19 right now. And I want you to take a look at this guide right here. This guide is to help save this tip. And unfortunately, a lot of times we have to get into tight areas where this guide gets in the way. So this happens an awful lot. You take the guide off and you use the tip, and sometimes you make contact and you'll start wearing this out quicker than it needs to be. So I just want to show you how I would cut this if I were on a car, or if I was on some kind of an odd shape. I would take the guide off, and I'll sacrifice the life of this tip to do it. So set on 19 amps, let's see what this will do. Okay, well, I didn't like the performance of the cut, so something was not set correctly. I took a look, and it shows that I'm only running at 60 psi. So I'm running below pressure. The machine doesn't perform until it hits the sweet spot, so I've got to readjust our compressor and back to make sure it gives us up to 70 psi. Sweet spot is 70 to 72 psi, and you can see it on your own gauge here. So let me make that change. We'll make another run. Okay, as I suspected, I'd turned my air compressor off, so I was running a bit low on pressure. Went ahead and turned it back on. Air is back up. I'm reset. I'm running at about 70 psi. So I'm going to go ahead and recut. I'm going to do a little corner cut here so you can see it. And you'll probably notice that I'm wearing safety glasses, and these are shaded safety glasses. So when you get into plasma cutting, the brightness coming off, or the luminance coming off the torch, they're not very bright like in stick welding or TIG welding. You know, so you can get by with 4 or 5 all the way up to 8 as far as the shade is concerned. So what you're going to watch me do is I'm going to go ahead and use these safety glasses to cut 16 gauge and 1/8 inch thick material. And when I progress up to the heavier stuff, I'm going to go ahead and go a full face shield. Now this face shield allows me to kick it down. I'm probably going to run at a 5 on my setting. So let's go ahead and let's see what this will do. I'm at 19 amps on the machine. Okay, well, I'm going to turn the machine on, and I'm just going to cut an ear off of this metal here, and I'm going to do that on all these metals. And you can see it was quick, it was easy. There's no major scale on the bottom at all. You can practically do this, put two metals together and go ahead and weld on your car. Now I'm going to jump up to 1/8 inch thick material here. Probably need a little more amperage, but I'm going to try it anyway. If it's running a little bit low, I may have to go from 19 up to maybe 25, but let's give it a shot. Okay, I was able to cut it at 19. I actually had to slow down just a little bit, so it's probably better at 20 or 21. And just keep in mind, the reason that I'm trying to set the right setting is to preserve this tip. It would be so easy for me to go ahead and turn the machine up to 50, but the longevity of this tip would go down. So I'm going to go ahead and shut the machine off, reset this material, a little bit heavier stuff, and I'll join you in just a few seconds. Okay, I went ahead and put my full mask protection on, and just so you know, I'm going to be looking through somewhere around a 4 to 5 shade in this, so I can see through. It's almost like the grinding mode in this. Went ahead and set this machine at 40 amps. Now it'll go up to 50, but we're now cutting 5/8 inch thick steel. And that was part of the advertisement of the machine. It'll cut this with a very nice clean cut, everyday use. Now, I'm not going to put the guide on yet because I still want to make a nice, close, clean cut. So I'm just going to cut a little ear off the end here. So let's see what it'll do. Okay, from this end, it looked like it cleaned pretty good. You got to slow your speeds down. You start getting into the thicker materials. So knock it right off there. And feel the underneath side. I got a little bit of slag. I'd clean that off. But overall, that cut very nice, very clean. Right now, the kerf, and when we talk about the kerf, is from the hit side. Wherever you cut, it's going to be a little bit wider than where it cuts at the bottom. So the kerf right now is a very sharp kerf, which is nice. As the tip gets a little bit older, that kerf will get just a little bit wider. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move this over. I'm going to put in 3/4 inch thick. And that's, you know what, 3/4 inch thick, that's quite a challenge. This 50 amp machine, I'm going to turn it up. I'm going to turn it all the way up to the 50 amps. So let me change over. I'll be back with you shortly. Okay, now I've got this machine set at its maximum. I'm at 50 amps. I've got 3/4 inch thick steel. Again, I'm not going to use the guide just because I want to cut off a corner and I want to get a really close arc. I want to get it as tight as I can. And the advertisement says that this is the heaviest that it'll cut and still leave a real cut or a clean cut. My travel speed's going to slow way down. But just know that I've got to use this shield just in case I get a lot of spewing coming back. Anyway, as I use this torch, it's going to start requiring a little more air to cool down. So I've turned the little green knob up to where I get post flow much longer than when I was doing sheet metal. So let's see what it'll do. Okay, well let's take a look at the top side, see what kind of kerf there is. If you'll notice the kerf is just a little bit bigger, not quite as clean, and it didn't just fall off. And that's not uncommon because on the back side there's always a little bit of crusty stuff that keeps things hanging on. So let me tap it and see if I can get it to fall off. And so take a look at this. It's not a clean cut, but you know, it did cut. So to say that it will cut 3/4 of an inch, it did it. I come from the old school where we have the Oxy-Acetylene. We used to cut this, but you can see there's some scale or decarb layer on there that grinds off very nicely. So it's not a fantastic cut. It's not a real super clean cut, but it'll get the job done. So now let's move up to 1 inch thick and see if we can get it done. All right, now I've got set up in front of me a block, if you will, or a bar stock. It's 1 inch thick steel. And I looked at the specifications. turn this machine all the way up to 50 amps. It says it will cut it, but it qualifies it by saying that it's a pretty brutal cut. All kinds of terms are used for that, and so we're just going to see what it'll do. Is it a severance cut? Is it will it cut all the way through it all? So let's try it. Okay, well, I slowed my travel speed down just about as far as I could go. I mean, I'm running probably 1 inch a minute, and it looks like it wants to cut, but let me see if I can knock it off here and even get a view of it. So let's try it. And, you know, I'd probably take the sledge to this and knock it off, but the point being in all this is that I could slow down to a ½ inch a minute and probably get this to cut, but just don't recommend it. I mean, I'm already impressed with the other cuts that it makes. So 1 inch, I don't think so. Anyway, you get to 3/4 inch, you're challenging a machine like this at 50 amps, and so overall, you know, you're looking at all these things. It's cutting very nicely. Didn't do any aluminum on this one, but just know that aluminum is a different rating altogether. So if you start cutting aluminum, you have to know that it's going to absorb about twice as much energy. So you're not going to get to 1 inch in aluminum. You're going to be lucky to cut half in aluminum. But thanks for letting me review this, and it's a pretty nice machine. Got a couple of features on it that I would change. I don't like the air fittings the way that they're set up, but overall, it's pretty darn good. Thanks for watching TIG Time. I'm Mr. TIG.